Hey, I'm Invader3 and this is a sphere. Well, maybe it's stretching the definitions a bit, but anyway, it's an icosphere. Today, in this devlog, I will show you how I got from this to this. So, to create a planet generator, I'd argue making the sphere is the most important part, since it defines and is the actual base of the planet. There were a couple of spheres to choose from. For example, the UV sphere, but it has bad polar distortions. The same with the cube sphere, where you generate a cube and then collapse each vertex to a unisphere. There's also the Geico sphere, but I chose, as I revealed earlier, the icosphere, having evenly distributed points across the surface. To make this in Unity, you first need to use the golden ratio like this to get the initial points. Then, honestly, to get the triangles it will have been pretty simple. Just label every point, visualize it with gizmos or spheres or something, figure out the order, and then make an array for the triangles. But for some reason, I of course didn't really realize I could do this, and spent an entire day making a procedural algorithm to automatically find the points. The system, very briefly, gets a point, finds its 5 neighbors based on distance, and then creates triangles. And then it excludes that point from ever being referenced again on the list or by other vertices. After some blood, sweat and tears, I finally got it working. After this, I made a subdivide function to make the sphere into an actual, sphere. The subdivide function basically works like this. For each triangle, it creates 3 new vertices, each vertex being the middle of an edge, and then create 4 new triangles out of these points. And then after that, it normalizes these new vertices to the unisphere. Then I tried to deform the sphere. Initially I thought this would be pretty easy since I've done procedural terrain generation before. Then I realized that I can't exactly map this 2D Perlin noise to this sphere without it looking horrible and having noticeable seams. At first I searched around a bit on Google to try and find out some code for 3D noise. I did find some, but it wasn't working particularly great, as you can see here. I mean, it looked like something, but the spikes it created were horrible and it wasn't particularly easy to control either. So don't tell anyone this is a secret. I actually just used the code from Sebastian Lake's planet generator. Look, you can blame me for this however much you want, but I'm not prepared to learn this right now. But I might revisit it someday. To make the noise look more interesting, I layered multiple noises or octaves with increasing scale and decreasing amplitude, which resulted in this. I also just imported the water shader from a previous project to make it look like an actual planet, and not just a deformed clump. To make the planet look a bit better, I made a terrain shader. It just checks the steepness of the normal. If it's steep enough it gets a rock grey color, and if it's flat it gets a green color. Unfortunately I crashed Unity because of a while loop. I did save beforehand, but the shader wasn't working properly after that. So I just at the time gave up and made everything green, since I didn't really plan on making big mountains for this planet at least. But now when making this video I noticed it does work, so I'll make a mountain / increased amplitude mode in the demo. Anyway, after this I implemented chunks so I can make an LOD or level of detail system. Making the chunk system was fairly easy. I just had to make the initial 20 triangles of the icosphere each into their own game objects. I changed the subdivide function to make it work with individual chunks instead, and made it work with the noise. When I had chunks, I could then implement a level of detail system. This took a bit longer to do. I first tried to make it work based off screen size, how much of the screen chunk was occupying, but it wasn't working at all, so I just made it work based off distance from the camera. Not really super accurate, but good enough for a prototype. Great, so I had this level of detail and chunk system implemented, but there were these ugly seams between chunks when they have different level of details. I looked into some possible solutions for this, but felt like it was kind of out of my scope, at least for this prototype. So the plant was cool and all, but I wanted some sort of minigame or something to do other than just pan around and look. So I made a very simple house in Blender that you can find, and when clicked it just changed its position. Then to make the planet more interesting and to cover up the houses, I made some clouds. Initially I tried to use Voronoi noise, but I felt like it looked pretty bad, so I used modified simple noise for the clouds instead, and I felt like it looked much nicer. I also added an atmosphere. This was no fancy shade or anything, it was just a sphere with a Fresnel effect. To finish things off, I made 3 houses spawn instead, added some polish like explosion particles and screen shake, and when you destroy 3 houses you get a new planet. And that's it. You probably noticed this was labeled as episode 1. Yes, this is a series, and this is not the full product. And the next devlog about this project will probably be in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you like this video and want to see more, and goodbye.